Thanks for being here. I owe this opportunity to my good friend Dick Fair, who's supposed to be doing what I'm about to do. Dick, you got someone else to paint your fence. Let's talk about hush kits. A hush kit is something that makes the 8D quieter. It also helped pay the bills. And let me explain why. In the late 80s, early 90s, the stage 3 noise rule was about to put the guillotine on the 8D fleet. We had about 4,000 airplanes flying in 1990, and the stage 3 noise rule was about to put them out of business by the end of the 90s. The economic life of these machines should have been in 2010, 2015, something like that. So these machines were generating 30 million engine hours a year, and this is $1990. And about $30 of that went to the Pratt bottom line in cash. That's rough numbers, that's $1 billion a year in $1990, which is about $2.5 billion today. So that was not going to be allowed to happen because we, first of all, didn't have a very robust single aisle strategy. So we needed that fleet to stay flying as long as possible. So the answer is, let's make the engine quieter. And to do so was absolutely necessary. 727, 737, the DC-9. The production of the 727 ended in 1984, 737 in 1988, and the DC-9 in 1982, which means they should fly till 2014, 2018, and 2012, respectively. So what do we do? How do we go about addressing this issue? Well, the first thing you do is you pluck me out of the V2500. They're still searching for something I can do. It hadn't worked so far, so they said, let's try this. So, go make these airplanes compliant with stage 3, which is about a 10 decibel reduction across the 3 noise criteria, about 3 or 4 decibels each condition. So, we needed to develop the hardware on these existing engines and package them in kits. We needed to find partners, and this was the very biggest obstacle. Boeing was not interested. In fact, they were against this. Douglas was somewhat helpful. The 737 was the biggest problem. We had about a dozen aircraft model engine combinations to certify. Our management did not want any part of the STC, Supplemental Type Certificate. They didn't want to own any aircraft STCs for fear of annoying Boeing and Douglas. That was a bit of an obstacle. And then we needed to sell these things. Finding partners who could sell was almost impossible. So, Boeing not cooperative. When we announced to the public that we were going to do this, Dean Thornton, who was then the president of Boeing, called Sel Burson out to Seattle, and then Sel invited me. And Boeing rolled out their technical staff for half a day to convince us that it couldn't be done. And when it was over, presentation was over, Dean Thornton, who was a kind of a leathery old guy, turned to Sel and said, Sel, what do you think? And Sel turned to me and said, well, Dan, what do you think? And I said that Boeing had a staff that was the envy of the industry. And if I had that staff, my confidence level would go from 90 to 100. Don't give these guys anything hard to do. Well, that wasn't really a very smart thing to say. But a bail sellout, and Boeing, I think, decided it was going to be trouble. So, what did we do then? Well, manpower was an issue at Pratt. We were deep in the 4000 program and V2500 program. So I had a staff of highly motivated people who were left over from those two programs. I needed 3 partners. They had to have airplanes. They had to have crews. They had to have some technical infrastructure. They had to know how to get and hold an STC and how to sell them. So how did we do this? Well, we searched and we found 3 people who could meet or nearly meet our criteria. FedEx on the 727. Fred Smith at FedEx bought the last 100 727s. And fortunately for us, he did the cargo doors on those airplanes. So he knew, he had Boeing data, and he knew how to get STCs, and he knew how to deal with Boeing. That solved a big problem on a 727. They had flight crews. They were highly motivated. They had, at one point, they had about 180 727s. They needed this to happen, and that's really critical. Then we got Airborne Express, had DC-9s. They flew out of Wilmington, Ohio, just southeast of Dayton. They were somewhat secretive. Douglas had a noise system that the industry suspected. They were very private about it. They let ABS use Airborne Express, now DHL. They let Airborne Express use that system. Airborne would not let us in their truck for fear of annoying Boeing, Douglas, and Boeing probably. But they were motivated also. They had about 60 airplanes, and they needed those airplanes to fly. They fly early in the morning. Both Airborne and FedEx flew early in the morning, had a lot of local airport pressure that could shut them down. So highly motivated. Third and most difficult was the 737. Had the biggest noise problem because the wing-mounted engines, the tail-mounted engines get shaded by the wing on approach, so their noise signature is a little bit better than the twin 737. Plus, 737s had the higher powered 8Ds, 15s and some 17s. So they were a challenge. We had to look at a suppressor for that. The suppressor takes on ambient air in addition to the mixer. It takes on ambient air. There's an extension to the nacelle, and it is quite quiet, but it was a performance problem. It had about a 4% performance hit. But it was a success because we needed to tell the world we could do this. And we certified the stage 3 on the 737. I don't think we sold very many suppressors. I don't know if Larry Gray or anybody's here who knows that. I don't think we sold very many of those. They were expensive. And we found as we went through the program, a lot of customers could reduce the gross weights of their airplanes and could reduce the engine thrust. And so we could sell kits, and they could rearrange their fleet and keep them flying. So as we went along, the mix of the hardware that we sold was changed. So we had a mixer on the back end. On the front end, we moved the IGVs, the 8D has inlet guide vanes, but they were too close to the first stage low and the fan, and and it had a siren effect. So we had a tone in the front end that we took away by moving the IGVs forward a little bit. So we had a package of parts. We could put them in the engine for a very little cost, and we could meet stage 3. Now, we estimated early on that we could capture half of the fleet, 2,000 airplanes, because some were going to retire for economics. 30-year-old airplane is probably not economic. So we guessed 2,000. We ended up selling 1,960 kits, 960 airplanes worth of kits. So we came really close. That number's a little bit debatable. But anybody who's here wants to debate it, let's see you outside. So, one of the ways we mitigated this problem, so Boeing said we couldn't do this. Boeing didn't know what we could do to the engine. They didn't really understand that we had some tricks we could do to the engine. The other thing is, we found that noise is 5 dBs of noise and 100 dB of corrections. So we became very good at flight test. For example, we would negotiate with farmers in Arizona to try microphones in strawberries, cotton. That was, I thought cotton would do it, and watermelons. Strawberries, anybody ask you, it's strawberries. Strawberries got us 0.3 of a dB. Now, was it really the strawberries? I don't know, I just know how to plant microphones now. So, we accomplished our goal. We saved about $2 billion in 1990 dollars by avoiding premature retirement. That is to say, stopping the curve of retirement from going like that to going like that. That's about $5 billion in today's dollars. It didn't help our single aisle strategy very much. And the reason that we had annoyed Boeing, and something that everybody should understand, probably you all do, but I'll say it anyway, that the business case for Pratt and the business case for Boeing has as much in common as a cosine function does with a sine function. They hardly ever meet. Boeing gets progress payments on their airplanes. When you order an airplane from Boeing, pay me. Progress payments along the way, and by the time the airplane is delivered, they're 100% paid. Selling engines is like selling kittens. Free or best offer. We wait 25 years. So if you try to negotiate a common business arrangement with Boeing or Airbus, and I've been involved in that, when they see how backloaded we are, they have to go spend time with their family. It's awesome what we go through on a business plan. So Boeing wants the fleet to go away. We want the fleet to stay. Tired iron. You're going through tired iron now, I think. Pratt loves tired iron. Boeing doesn't like tired iron. They don't make money in the aftermarket. They make some, but they haven't been very successful at that. So, to make a long story even longer, what did I learn? Well, they're listed here for the most part. One is motivated people can move mountains. That people, ABS and FedEx were not going to let this go away. FedEx had hired a noise consultant because they don't do acoustics. They had a noise consultant who told them about a year before they got there that they couldn't do it. And we had a meeting in Memphis. They no longer had an acoustic consultant. We had Paul Montour, may he rest in peace, who's a hero of this program. Someone who I had to save from being laid off in the middle of the program. Paul was a brilliant acoustician who knew how to plant microphones and knew where to plant them. Highly motivated, highly skilled. That leads to the second point. Pratt & Whitney has talent everywhere you look. I didn't have a big staff, had a very small staff. I whined every time I got a chance. It didn't help. Ed Crow taught me once, I remember Ed's here somewhere, once when I was whining in his office, not in this program, but Ed took his hands and he went like that. And I went, oh my God, I'm whining again. If you have a problem at Pratt and you don't have anybody quote on your team, everybody in this room I don't know most of you, of course, but everybody in this room would be willing to help anybody else. That's my experience at Pratt all that time. You can go ask anybody a question, and they will be first annoyed, and then second, curious, and then third, they'll be annoying you. That was my honest experience. We had lots of issues, technical issues, acoustic issues, not that that's not technical, but we could always get help from the V2500 program, from the 4000 program. People sitting at their desk who know stuff are more than happy to share what they know. I've never had an experience where somebody would say, well, sorry, I can't help you. I mean, literally. So don't ever give up. If you have something that looks insolvable, you're not looking hard enough. Never let your boss get surprised. I'd be surprised if you didn't know that. But don't go to your boss, especially if he's Sel Burson, and say, well, Northam needs a $10 million loan. He said, you think they'll pay me back? I said, yeah. He said, well, put your badge on the table. So I was a fool, I did. He had to slam the door, sat down, he said, Webb, God damn it, don't ever do that. Nobody puts their badge on the table. I didn't know that rule. But it was a surprise that bothered him. He should have been given, he said, you don't have to go into Hartford and get your ass kicked. I said, no, Sel, it's a short walk from me. And then last, don't quit. Don't quit. I don't think anybody in this room would ever quit. But don't quit, don't give up. There is help inside of Pratt. There's a lot of really smart people at Pratt. And if you don't believe that, wait till you retire and see what the rest of the world's like.